Welcome back, everyone, to another story. We really hope you enjoy the story. This one starts off pretty ordinary but takes a turn I definitely wasn't expecting, so stick around until the end. Please enjoy the story. My name is Nathan. I'm 19 years old, and I had just started my second semester of college. I lived in one of the older dorm buildings on campus, a place everyone called Halstead Hall. It was a pretty run-down building with creaky floors, flickering hallway lights, and elevators that only worked when they felt like it. But the rent was cheap, and I couldn't really complain, since my scholarship barely covered my tuition, let alone housing. I shared a small room on the third floor with my roommate Marcus, who was probably the most laid-back guy I had ever met. Marcus. And I got along really well. We had a lot of the same interests, and we both stayed up way too late playing video games instead of studying for our classes. Life was pretty simple back then, and I really had no idea that everything about my life was about to change over one incredibly weird night that started with something as boring as being hungry at 2 a.m. It was a Thursday night, or technically a Friday morning since it was past midnight, and Marcus and I had been grinding through an online match for the past 4 hours. We hadn't eaten dinner properly. We had just snacked on chips and drank soda the entire evening around 2 a.m. My stomach started rumbling so loudly that Marcus could hear it through his headset. "Dude, you sound like a whale, go get some food," said Marcus while laughing at me. I paused my game and stood up, stretching my back, which had gotten stiff from sitting for so long. "Yeah, I guess I should grab something, the cafeteria is closed," I said back to him. Marcus pulled his headphones off one ear and looked at me. "There's that vending machine in the basement, the one near the laundry room. I think it has actual sandwiches and stuff, not just candy." He said I hadn't been to the basement of Halstead Hall in like a month and a half. The last time I had gone down there was to do laundry, and I remembered the vending machine, but I had never actually used it. It looked pretty old, and I always assumed the food inside was probably expired by like 6 years. Still, my stomach was demanding something, so I grabbed my dorm key and my wallet and told Marcus I would be back in a few minutes. The hallway outside our room was completely empty, which was normal for that time of night. The only sound was the buzzing of one of the fluorescent lights that had been flickering for weeks, and that maintenance kept promising to fix. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button, waiting for what felt like forever, before it finally arrived with a loud ding that echoed down the hallway. I stepped inside and hit the button for the basement. The elevator groaned as it started descending, and I stood there staring at my reflection in the scratched metal walls. I looked pretty rough. My hair was messy from wearing a headset for hours, and I had bags under my eyes. I was wearing a plain gray t-shirt and some sweatpants, basically the classic college gamer look. The basement was even quieter than the third floor, and honestly a lot creepier. The lights down there were dim, and half of them didn't work at all. The laundry room was to my left with all its machines silent and empty, and to my right down a short hallway was the vending machine area. I walked over to it slowly, my flip-flops making a slapping sound against the tile floor. When I got to the vending machine, I stopped and just kind of stared at it for a moment. It was way older than I remembered. The front glass was a bit foggy, and the machine itself had this weird beige color that reminded me of appliances from the 1980s. There was a small sticker on the side that said "Property of Halstead Hall," which had faded so much I could barely read it. But the weirdest part was that I had never noticed before. There were no brand names anywhere on it, just this generic-looking machine with rows of snacks and sandwiches inside. I dug into my pocket and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill and slid it into the machine. The machine made a strange humming noise as it accepted the bill, and I saw the digital display light up, but instead of showing my balance in numbers, it showed a bunch of symbols I couldn't recognize. Weird. I said to myself out loud, I figured it was just glitching, so I punched in the code for a turkey sandwich, which was C4. The machine hummed louder, and I heard the mechanical arm inside start to move, but instead of dropping the sandwich, a small door I had never noticed before slid open at the bottom of the machine and a can popped out into the tray. It wasn't a soda can. It was this strange-looking metallic cylinder with a pull tab on top and no label at all whatsoever. "What the heck," I said, reaching down and grabbing the can. It was cold. Really cold, like it had been in a freezer, not just refrigerated, and it was heavier than a normal soda can. I turned it around in my hands, looking for any kind of label or expiration date, but there was nothing, just polished silver metal that reflected the dim basement lights. I should have just left it there and walked away. I know that now, but at the time I was tired, hungry, and honestly kind of amused by the whole situation. I figured maybe it was some kind of energy drink or new soda that the vending machine company was testing out. I decided I would take it back to the room, show Marcus, and we would drink it together as some kind of dumb late-night adventure. On the way back up in the elevator, I kept turning the can over in my hands, trying to figure out what it was. There was one small marking near the bottom that I hadn't noticed at first. It was engraved rather than printed, and it looked like a little little symbol, maybe a triangle inside a circle. It didn't mean anything to me, so I ignored it when I got back to the room. Marcus had paused his game and was scrolling on his phone. He looked up when I came in, and immediately his eyes went to the can in my hand. "Where's your sandwich? And what is that said?" Marcus with a confused look on his face. "I don't know. The machine gave me this instead of a sandwich. Look at it," I said back to him, tossing him the can. Marcus caught it and started examining it, just like I had a few minutes earlier, bro. "This is weird. There's no label at all. Should we even drink this? It could be like radioactive or something," he said while laughing. I laughed too and sat down on my bed. "I mean, it came out of a vending machine in a college dorm. How bad could it be?" I said back to him, famous last words, honestly. Marcus tossed the can back to me, and I stared at it for another few seconds before deciding to just crack it open. The pull tab made a satisfying hissing sound, and a small wisp of vapor rose from the top, which was a bit alarming but not enough to stop me. I sniffed the top of the can, and it actually smelled pretty good. It smelled like berries, and something floral, kind of like a fruity tea. It doesn't smell bad. I said before taking a small sip. The taste was actually amazing. It was sweet but not too sweet, with a little bit of a tangy aftertaste. It was probably one of the best drinks I had ever tasted before. I knew what was happening. I had gulped down half the can. "This stuff is actually really good. You want to try some?" I said to Marcus. Marcus shook his head. "No way, dude. If you die, at least I'll be alive to tell the story," he said while grinning. I laughed and finished the rest of the can in a few more gulps. It was really that good. I set the empty can on my desk and picked my controller back up, ready to jump back into the game. We had a good 10 more minutes of gaming before anything started feeling weird. At first, it was just a warm feeling in my chest, kind of like when you drink hot chocolate on a cold day. I thought maybe the drink had some kind of warming ingredient in it, like ginger or something, and I didn't think much of it, but then the warmth started spreading. It moved down into my stomach and then out into my arms and legs. It wasn't uncomfortable at all. In fact, it actually felt really nice, like I was being wrapped in a warm blanket from the inside, but I knew something wasn't right. "Hey, Marcus," I said, pausing the game again. "This drink is doing something weird." "What?" said Marcus, turning to look at me the moment his eyes landed on me. His mouth dropped open. He pulled his headset all the way off and just stared at me, his face going pale, dude. "Your face," said Marcus in a shaky voice. "What about my face?" I asked. "Getting nervous. Your face is like changing." "Look in a mirror," said Marcus. I jumped up from my bed and rushed to the small mirror we had on the back of the closet door. What I saw made my heart stop. My face was different, softer somehow. The sharp angles of my jaw were rounded out and my cheekbones looked higher. My lips looked a little fuller too. And my eyes, I couldn't put my finger on it, but they looked bigger and brighter. "I look weird. What's happening to me?" I said, touching my face, which felt smoother than usual, as if I hadn't grown any stubble in weeks. Even though I had shaved just that morning, as I stood there staring at myself, I could actually feel more changes happening. It wasn't painful at all. In fact, it was kind of pleasant, which somehow made it even more terrifying. My hair, which had been short and a little messy, started growing right there in front of me. It grew down past my ears, down my neck, and eventually past my shoulders. It also became softer and shinier, and it turned a lighter shade of brown, almost a caramel color. "Oh my God. Oh my God." I kept repeating, touching my hair, which now felt silky between my fingers. Marcus was standing behind me now, watching in the mirror with a horrified expression. "Nathan, your body," said Marcus, pointing at my chest. I looked down and immediately regretted it. My chest was pushing outward, creating 2 small mounds under my t-shirt, and they kept growing. My shirt started stretching to accommodate them, and I could feel my nipples becoming more sensitive as they changed. "No, no, no, this isn't happening, I kept saying, while Marcus just stood there, completely frozen. The changes kept coming. I felt my waist pulling inward, like an invisible corset was cinching me, while my hips pushed outward. At the same time, my sweatpants, which had always been a little loose, suddenly felt tight around my hips and thighs, but weirdly loose around my waist. I could feel my thighs becoming softer and thicker, while my calves became more shapely. I was also getting shorter. I watched in the mirror as my eye level dropped inch by inch until I was probably a good 5 or 6 inches shorter than I had been. Just a few minutes earlier, my hands and feet were shrinking too. My fingers becoming slimmer and more delicate, and my feet becoming smaller inside my flip-flops. It felt so bizarre, feeling my whole body just reshape itself, while I stood there completely helpless to stop it. Marcus finally seemed to snap out of his shock and rushed over to me. "Should I call someone? Should I call an ambulance?" he asked, panicking. I don't know what would we even say. "Hi, my friend drank a mystery drink from a vending machine and turned into a girl. They would think we were on drugs," I said back. my voice sounding higher and higher with every word, until eventually when I spoke again, my voice was completely feminine. It was soft and gentle with a slightly musical quality to it. Not at all like the deeper voice I had been used to for years. I clamped my hand over my mouth in shock at hearing myself speak. It felt so wrong to hear such a girly voice coming out of me, but at the same time I couldn't deny that the voice was actually really pretty. Eventually the changes stopped, and I just stood there in front of the mirror, completely different from how I had looked 20 minutes earlier. My t-shirt was stretched tight across my new chest, and my sweatpants were sagging at the waist while being tight. Everywhere else I was staring at a completely different person. I was a girl. I was actually a girl. How is this even possible? Said Marcus. Finally speaking up, he sounded just as shocked as I felt. I don't know, Marcus. I don't know. I just wanted a sandwich, I said, feeling tears well up in my eyes, which was weird because I had never been the type to cry easily. But now the tears just came out. I sat down on the edge of my bed, my body feeling foreign and strange. I didn't know how to move in it. My center of gravity was completely different, and my legs felt weirdly long compared to my new, smaller torso. Even sitting down felt weird because of how my hips were now shaped. Marcus paced back and forth for a few minutes, trying to figure out what to do. Okay, let's think about this. Maybe it wears off. Maybe it's like a temporary thing, he said, trying to reassure both of us. I hope so. I really hope so, I said, while wiping my eyes with the back of my hand, which I noticed now had much more delicate fingers with softer-looking skin. We sat in silence for a while, both just trying to process what had just happened. I kept glancing at myself in the mirror, hoping that somehow the reflection would change back, but it didn't. Every time I looked, I was still a girl, a really pretty girl if I was being honest with myself, but a girl nonetheless. After about an hour of us just sitting there in shock, we decided we couldn't just sit and wait. We had to do something first. Though there was the immediate problem of my clothes not fitting anymore, my shirt was way too tight and my sweatpants were falling down every time I stood up. I definitely couldn't go to the campus health center or even walk down the hallway looking like this. Marcus had an idea though. He texted his friend from down the hall, this girl named Priya, who they had been friends with since freshman orientation, without going into too many details. He just told her he had an emergency and needed to borrow some clothes for a friend. Priya, being the amazing person that she was, didn't ask too many questions. She just showed up 10 minutes later with a small pile of clothes and left them at the door, telling Marcus to bring them back whenever. Marcus grabbed the clothes and brought them into the room. I looked through the pile and my heart sank a little. There was a pair of light wash jeans, a pink long-sleeve top, a bra, a pair of socks, and even a pair of white sneakers. Priya had thought of everything. I don't know how to put this stuff on, I said. While holding up the bra, Marcus looked away awkwardly. You can figure it out. I'll wait outside while you change, he said, and quickly left the room, closing the door behind him. I stood there alone holding the bra and just kind of stared at it for a while. I had never even really seen one up close before, and I definitely had never worn one, but I couldn't just walk around with my t-shirt stretched to its breaking point. So I took a deep breath and pulled off my too tight shirt. Seeing my new chest fully exposed for the first time was shocking. They were bigger than I had realized while they had been under the shirt. Not huge, but definitely noticeable. I fumbled with the bra for a good 5 minutes before I finally figured out that I could hook it in front of me first, and then rotate it around and pull the straps up over my shoulders. Once I had it on, I understood why women wore them. The support actually felt kind of nice. I pulled the pink top on next. It fit me perfectly, which was both a relief and a bit unsettling, since it meant I was now the same size as Priya. Then I wiggled out of my sweatpants and put on the jeans. Getting them zipped up was a bit of a struggle because of my new hips, but eventually I got them buttoned. They fit really well too, accentuating my new shape in a way that made me feel super self-conscious. I put the socks on and slipped my feet into the sneakers, which also fit perfectly. Finally, I walked over to the mirror to see the whole outfit, and I could barely recognize myself. I looked like a completely normal college girl. Someone you would pass on the quad and not think twice about. I was even kind of cute if I was being honest with myself, which was such a weird thought to have about my own reflection. I opened the door, and Marcus walked back in, his eyes going wide when he saw me. Wow, you look... He stopped himself and cleared his throat. I mean, you look normal, like a normal girl, he said awkwardly. Thanks, I guess, I said, trying to smile. But my new face felt weird when I smiled. We spent the next few hours just trying to figure out what to do next. We Googled everything we could think of. Mystery vending machine drink, gender transformation drink, weird can in vending machine college dorm, but obviously nothing useful came up. We thought about going back to the vending machine to see if we could find any information about it, or maybe find another can that might reverse the effects that seemed like our best shot. Honestly, Around 5 in the morning, after we had both been awake for way too long, we finally decided to go back down to the basement and check the machine again. I was terrified of leaving the room, even though it was still dark outside and no one would really be around at that time. I was worried about running into someone who would recognize me or ask questions, but I couldn't just hide in the room forever, so I took a deep breath and followed Marcus out into the hallway. Walking in the sneakers felt weird because my new center of gravity made my hips swing a little as I walked, and I could feel my hair brushing against my shoulders with every step. It was such a strange sensation. The basement was just as quiet as it had been earlier when we got to the vending machine, though we both stopped in our tracks. The machine was different. It was still there in the same spot, but the front looked completely normal. Now, it was a modern-looking vending machine with a bright digital display and clear glass showing regular snacks and drinks, all with proper labels. There were no weird symbols, no faded stickers, no beige color. It looked like a totally normal machine that you would find anywhere. Marcus and I just stared at it for a moment. "What the heck?" said Marcus, walking up and touching the glass. "This isn't the same machine. I mean, it kind of looks like where the other one was, but this isn't it," he said. I stepped closer too and pressed my face against the glass, looking at the rows of chips and sodas. And yes, even the turkey sandwich I had originally wanted. "This is so weird. There's no way they replaced the whole machine in like 3 hours," I said. Marcus tried putting $1 into the machine and pressing C4. And sure enough, a completely normal turkey sandwich dropped down into the tray. No weird cans, no strange symbols, nothing. We went back upstairs, completely deflated. Whatever had happened had been some kind of one-time weird event, and there was no going back. Neither of us slept that night. We just sat there talking about what we should do. I couldn't exactly go to my classes looking like this, and I couldn't just call my parents and tell them their son had turned into a girl overnight. I decided that for now, I would just have to pretend to be sick and stay in the room while Marcus went to his classes and figured out what to do next. The next few days were probably the strangest of my entire life. I spent most of my time in the dorm room getting used to my new body. I practiced walking around trying to figure out how to move without feeling awkward. Marcus brought me food from the cafeteria and helped me look up information online. We started making a list of things we needed to figure out. How would I explain my absence to my parents? How would I go to classes? How would I take exams as someone whose ID no longer matched their face? There were so many problems and no obvious solutions. Priya eventually found out what had happened because she came to check on us, and Marcus couldn't come up with a good enough excuse fast enough to her credit, though she believed us pretty quickly, probably because she was standing right there looking at me, and I was very obviously not the Nathan she had briefly met a couple times earlier in the year. Priya turned out to be a total lifesaver. She took me shopping for clothes and helped me figure out things like which shampoo I would need for my new hair type and how to style it in a way that looked natural. She even offered to teach me some basic makeup. Though I told her I wanted to hold off on that for a while, I still wasn't ready to fully commit to looking like a girl, even though there wasn't much choice at that point. But there was something interesting that started happening over those first few weeks. The more time I spent as a girl, the less it bothered me at first. Every time I saw my reflection, I felt a wave of anxiety and confusion, but after a while, I started actually kind of liking what I saw. The girl in the mirror was pretty and had a nice smile, and honestly, she looked happier than Nathan usually had. I ended up having to tell my parents an elaborate lie that I had transferred to a different program and would be living off campus so they wouldn't visit me. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it bought me some time. Priya helped me register for classes under a new name, Natalie. Since I couldn't exactly go back to being Nathan, the university was surprisingly easy to fool with some forged documents and a story about a family emergency. I know that sounds crazy, but Priya's older sister worked in student services and pulled some strings for us. I owed her big time by the time midterms rolled around. Natalie had officially become my identity. I was going to classes as a girl, making new friends, and even getting used to wearing makeup, which Priya had eventually convinced me to try. I had my own style. Now I liked wearing soft sweaters and jeans, and I had started wearing my hair in a half-up, half-down style that I thought looked really cute. The strangest part was that I was actually happier than I had been. As Nathan, I wasn't sure if it was because of some effect of the drink still altering my brain, or because I had genuinely just needed a change, but life felt lighter. Somehow, like a weight I hadn't even known I was carrying had been lifted. Marcus and I remained best friends throughout all of it. He even joked that having a girl best friend was way better than having a guy roommate, because now he had someone who could actually give him fashion advice for dates. Priya became one of my closest friends too, and the three of us hung out constantly. The vending machine in the basement of Halstead Hall remained a normal, boring vending machine for the rest of the year. I checked on it a few times, but it never gave me anything weird again. Sometimes I wondered if I had imagined the whole thing, the mysterious old machine, the strange and the symbol at the bottom, but then I would look in the mirror and remember that, no, it had definitely happened. It's been about a year now since that night, and I honestly can't imagine going back to being Nathan. I know that sounds crazy, but Natalie feels like who I was always meant to be. I have a life. I love friends who care about me, and I even started dating this really sweet guy from my art history class named Julian. He's tall and quiet and reads philosophy books for fun, which sounds pretentious, but he's actually really down to earth and kind. He doesn't know about my past, and I'm not sure if I'll ever tell him some things are just easier, left unsaid. Sometimes late at night, I still think about that vending machine and wonder what it really was. Maybe it was some kind of experimental drink that got into the machine by accident. Maybe it was something more magical than that. I don't think I'll ever really know, and I'm not sure I want to know anymore. I have my life now, and I'm not going to spend it chasing after answers to questions that probably don't have any. If you had told Nathan a year ago that he would end up here happy and living as a girl named Natalie and dating a philosophy nerd, he would have thought you were absolutely insane. But here I am, and I couldn't be happier. Looking back on it, all that hungry 2 a.m. trip to the basement really did change everything, and even though it started as one of the most terrifying nights of my life, it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me. Thanks for watching this video. More videos will be coming very soon. We would really appreciate it if you would like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.